And I'm back here now with Tommy Reichental, and we had a wonderful discussion yesterday. But I found after 2 hours of talking, we still only got as far as 1959 when Tommy arrived in Dublin. So today we're going to continue from there, because Tommy's life, if it wasn't, well, certainly absolutely and utterly tragic, it was certainly an interesting life up to that point, but it gets just as interesting but more positive from then on, I think. So Tommy, tell me, you came to Ireland to work as an engineer. Maybe you'd go from there.
Well, I came to Ireland because I made a contract with an English industrialist to set up for him a zip factory. He was one of the biggest zip manufacturers in England, and they wanted to get started here, but he couldn't get anybody to do it. I mean, we're talking about end of 1959. Ireland was a different place that it is today. I mean, you can't compare it. I never forget when I come to Ireland, I saw children barefoot still, and that's how Ireland was. It just started. So he couldn't get anybody here. He advertised in England, and he couldn't get anybody in England. Not because there were not people that could do it, but at the time there wasn't the best of relation between England and Ireland.
No.
And nobody wanted to come here,
yeah.
Especially from England. So my cousin worked in the household as an au pair girl, and by chance she learned also English. And when you're learning English, you usually, when you have newspaper, you read the headlines. You don't read the article because you're not sufficiently able to do it. So, and then you reading the various advertisements, just to get into it. And by chance, she came to this ad where it said looking for
Sorry, can you just repeat that there? It just went there for a second.
She came to this ad where it said this company is looking for a manager to set up a factory to manufacture zips in Ireland. And my cousin, very innocently, went to her boss in the household. Of course, she never even spoke to him generally. And she said, his name was Koppel, and she said to him, Mr. Koppel, you're going to have a competition in England, in Ireland. And he said, why you think so? And she showed him this ad in the paper, in the English paper. And he said, well, I won't have any competition because I put the ad into the paper. I mean, it's something, 1 in a million, And she said, why do you advertise it in England, not in Ireland? He said, I couldn't get in Ireland. And when I advertising here, nobody wants to go to Ireland, So,
I know, because that was the year, 2 years later, I suppose, 4 years later, I would have come back from England with my mother, and my dad was English, and he couldn't come back. It took him 14 years to get to Ireland.
Yeah.
Don't know whether it was nerves or what. I don't think it was. I just think he couldn't get work.
Yeah, I know. It was at the time when I came here, I mean, the unemployment was very, very high, the 23%, 24%. And she told him, I have a cousin. He studied in Germany, just going to return to Israel. Maybe he will take the position. And he got in touch with me. And he just said, come to London. He sent me a ticket, airline ticket to come to London, and that he has a proposition. And if I like it, good, we sign a contract. If not, I will have a holiday on his account, So
always a positive.
At the time, I was, I don't know, 23, 24-year-old. So, of course, it was another adventure. I thought to myself, why not? There is nothing that I lose if I go there. And within 2 days, we signed a contract. The contract was that he will send me to Italy to learn how to make the zips, because he got his machinery from there. And then I will set up the factory, and I have to stay with him for 3 years. After 3 years, I can return to Israel, or I can stay with him. So I signed the contract, and I went to Italy. As it happened, I learned what I had to learn within 3 or 4 weeks. It wasn't big science for me. I was an engineer, of course. And but to get me to Ireland, to get a work permit to come to Ireland was a big problem.
Oh, I bet.
Yeah, because of the unemployment here. And so my boss, Mr. Koppel, had to convince the alien office that I'm coming to Ireland, not taking a wage job, but I'm going to create jobs. So it took about, I don't know, about 8 months. So I was in Italy for 8 months. I learned the language. I got fantastic wages because I was employed by him.
And then you came back to poor old, miserably cold Ireland.
Yeah. So I had a fantastic life in Italy. The Italian girls were lovely girls. We went dancing, and I enjoyed myself. I mean, what could I do? And I traveled in Italy. And
you were 24 years old. You were due it to enjoy yourself.
Yeah. So, and I had money. There was no problem because I got very high wages. And in Italy, the wages were very low. And I used to smoke at the time. I remember I used to smoke the American cigarettes, the Chesterfield and all these, which were very expensive at the time. Of course, the Italian cigarettes, they were just stinking, So every time, wherever I was, everybody always asked, have you a cigarette, because I couldn't speak from the beginning Italian, but I was friendly with the people. And so it cost me every day about 60 cigarettes, because every time people wanted cigarettes from me, because they knew that I smoking the American cigarettes, and they were very expensive.
You could have set up your own little black market.
I didn't know. I had to buy it like ordinary. But anyway, I found the Italian people just amazing. I mean, from the beginning, when they see a foreigner, they try to sort of do it, you buy something, you pay more than anybody else. But once you begin to know them, I used to go to the market and buy vegetable and fruit, and they all knew me there, and they used to shout, Tommaso, Tommaso, I have beautiful oranges put away especially for you.
Yeah.
and somebody had plums or something like this. And under the counter when I come, they would take it out. That's for you,
So
special.
you had a positive impact in people's lives even
Oh,
then.
I just everybody loved me. I know how to talk to people and everything. Anyway, after 8 months, I got a permit to come to Ireland, and I started to work. It was in Rathfarnham, here in, I don't know exactly the name of the street now, but I remember the potato factory was beside us. And so we ate an awful lot of potatoes,
Potatoes,
potatoes, yeah,
crisps.
crisp, yeah, just potatoes.
I gave them up 2 years ago. They were my addiction.
Yeah, we used to eat a lot of them, and the smell of the oil and everything. They are
Fabulous.
now outside of, I don't know, somewhere in the country. But anyway, while I was setting it up and employing people, I had to go to the alien office every month because they wanted to make sure that what I come for was really what I'm doing. They used to come to the factory and see if I'm there because there was always the suspicion maybe the whole setup was to get me into Ireland. It was.
Yeah.
But of course, it was genuine, and I ended up with about 25 people working for me. We got the um, factory going. I remember I didn't know any people here in Ireland, especially I didn't know any Jewish people in Ireland, but I used to go to the Maccabi sport place. And one evening, there was a film, and it was a Israeli film. And I, of course, went because of the Israeli film to go to see it. And there I met a lady that I knew from before. Lady at the time it was a girl. I mean, I was only young, and she was sitting with another girl. And I just was sitting behind them, and I was speaking to that girl that I knew. And the girl beside asked, who is that boy? And she told that, yeah, that's Tomas Reichental. He's Israeli, and she said, would you introduce me to him? And
the love story began.
Yeah, it was Ivan. It was my future wife.
What was her name?
Ivan.
Ivan.
Yeah, Ivan. And she introduced me to her. And that evening, after the film, I took her to. I remember it was a cafe just before the O'Connell Bridge. It was actually quite famous. Any actors and Orson Welles and people used to go there. And I said to myself, I take her for a tea. She was a lovely, lovely girl, even. And I took her there for the evening. We had a lovely evening. And that's how the romance started. And within a year, we got married. We fell in love. And
Ivan was Jewish also, wasn't she?
Yeah, of course, she was Jewish. And and Ivan Blackman, I mean.
But she was from Dublin.
Yeah,
she was a Dublin Jew.
She was born in Dublin, and their father was English, but the mother, she was
Irish.
She was born in Ireland. So anyway, I married Ivan, and after a while, I think must have been just the 3 years, I decided to return to Israel with Ivan, you know.
Yeah.
And of course, it was terrible. For the first time, she left her parents and things. So in Israel, I uh, started a factory with my brother for manufacturing the tool for the woodworking industry. And this factory became very successful. I only stayed for 4 years because the parents of Ivan, my father-in-law, he had a manufacturing jewelry business here in
Okay.
Dublin. And he all the time was saying to Ivan, why Tommy doesn't come back? I have nobody to take it over, and somebody has to look after the factory, and Tommy will be very suitable for it and things. And with my brother, we worked very long hours. We started this business from nothing, you know. So we worked from the morning, 7 o'clock in the morning till 9 o'clock in the evening, you know, 10, 11 hours, 12 hours a day. And we were throwing all we did, everything went to this big hall. We never saw anything out of it, you know, you
Yeah.
working and working. And in the end, you know, the pressure all the time, my wife saying, you know, my parents want you to come, my father would, you should run the jewelry factory and saying you are struggling. So, you know, it's always, for a girl to leave the house is much more difficult than for a boy. And so eventually I agreed to return to Ireland.
Did you regret having to leave Israel? I mean, I'm sure the weather was very enticing in Israel.
No,
It was
no.
very warm and
Yeah, I know, but no, I didn't. It was just, you know, hard work, and I didn't see anything out of it, you know. But of course, eventually my brother became a big industrialist. He was very successful and became very wealthy person. Internationally, he did export and everything. Um, so he's still alive in Israel. He's retired, of course. He gave the factory eventually to his daughters. And
okay, at least he had somebody to give it to.
yeah, because he just couldn't. He just gave it to them. And I mean, it was a high-tech factory. It's just incredible, everything.
But Tommy, isn't that, when you think about it, isn't that the greatest insult, the greatest comeback, if you like, to Nazism and to the Gestapo, that you were so successful
Yeah.
and that you went on to have happy families, happy lives, successful careers, successful lives where you were absolutely adored by everyone that met you.
Yeah, absolutely. Not only this, my brother bought a big factory in Germany that was sort of a competitor to what he was doing. And he bought it over because the factory in Germany wasn't going well. And so he bought the factory over with the workers and everybody. And the factory in Germany succeeded as well with him. And he said, when you spoke to him, he said, that was my biggest revenge. Not that he did harm to the people. He actually, the people that worked with they liked him. He used to come once or twice a year and sort of give a pep talk to the workers there and everything. And they liked him and they had good condition and everything. But he said, you know, we were in the camp and what the German did to me. And here I am now I'm managing them.
And employing them.
I'm not doing anything. I'm showing them the right way, So he was very proud of this, that he was able to do it. But anyway, that was my brother. I come here, and as I said, it was in 1961 that I got married to Ivan, and we had 3 children. We were very happy and everything. But unfortunately, after 43 years together, Ivan got cancer, and in 2003, she died.
She died.
Yeah, and it was very tragic for me. Not only that, but 3 months later, my mother passed away as well. My mother was 96 years old, also had a lovely life after the war. And so I had these 2 women in my life passing away, one after another.
But isn't it, I meant to actually ask you, Tommy, of the 16 that originally went off on the transportation to Bergen-Belsen and to
13 of us.
13 of you, I should say. After the 13 of you went off on the transportations to different camps, you to Bergen-Belsen, how many of you actually made it out alive?
So
how many of you lived in freedom?
Yeah, all together, there were about 42 of the family. I'm talking about now from my mother's side and from my father's side. 42 were taken away. Only 6 of us survived. And it was from the 12 of us.
That makes me so angry, Tommy, I have to say. I don't know how you have actually stayed so resolute and so composed and so dignified through all of this, because it makes my blood boil.
Yeah. Well, I was always optimist. I always looked forwards, not backward. I didn't. This is why I didn't even speak about anything. I just wanted to put it behind me and make my future successful. Not my past was my past. So from the 12 of us, 5 of us in Bergen-Belsen survived, and 1 from Buchenwald. Yeah, from the 7. 1 there, that was my cousin. He was 15 years old. So.
And you all moved to Israel? All 5 of you moved to Israel?
All 5 of us moved to Israel, yes. In Bergen-Belsen, we lost my grandmother. She died in Bergen-Belsen. She died on the 7th of March, 1945, just months before we were liberated. She was an old lady, and she just gave up. She got like a skeleton. She dried up, basically. She just couldn't keep alive. She didn't want to live anymore.
Yeah, she'd lost all hope.
Yeah, it was too difficult, and I never remember that day, of course.
No, you were too young.
Horrific to see how her body was treated. She was just thrown on the top of a pile of corpses and like a piece of dirt, So this is something I will never forget. I take it with me to the grave as well. But yeah, so.
But we're now here, and you're happy, and well, insofar as your wife has died and your mother has died, but life has been good to you.
Yeah.
Post-war.
After my wife passed away, of course, I was a partner in the jewelry business. My father-in-law retired, and I worked with my brother-in-law together. We sort of have it 50-50. And when my wife died, I sort of said to myself, what the hell I'm working? For who? I don't need any more. And I have no responsibility. My
Yeah.
children, they all, thank God, were successful. I have 3 boys.
Yeah.
They, whatever they're doing it very well. And therefore, I don't have responsibility for them. My wife passed away. I have no responsibility for anybody, only myself. And I have enough. What should I work for my brother-in-law? So once my wife passed away after a month or two, I went to my brother-in-law and I said to him, David, I will be here till Christmas, and at Christmas finished. I'm leaving the company. I will leave everything, pass all my knowledge and everything what is necessary, so things are running smoothly. And then I started to work only 3 days a week, and come Christmas, never forget that day. Christmas, when you leaving for the Christmas holiday, we had drinks and cakes and things, all the workers there and everything. And I suddenly said, thanks for everything. This is my last day.
Oh, for God's sake, Tommy, drop a bombshell. Why don't you?
And that's what I left. And when you sort of, I worked all my life. And I must say that whatever I did, I always had the choice. It's not like today, unfortunately. It's very difficult for young people. They go to universities and they qualify their qualification, and in the end, they can't find a job, so they do some other uh, job not in their field at all. And it is terrible because it's not something you want to do, but you have to do it in order to survive.
Survive.
I, thank God, every time did only what I wanted to do. And I enjoyed that. It was never the main thing, the money. It was to be occupied and succeed what I'm doing.
And at what age, Tommy, did you decide? At what point was it? At that point that you decided to talk about your experiences?
So, this happened. My wife died in 2003, and it was end of 2003 that I finished to work. And so you know how it is when you're working all your life and things, and suddenly there is nothing. You're doing your holiday, you're going to visit everybody, you're cleaning your shed, and you're doing all the things that you wanted to do for a long time but never had time for it. But eventually, and it doesn't take long, 3-4 weeks is all done, and then you sort of ask yourself, so what now? And I wasn't the type that I just can sit around and do nothing. So the first thing I started, for the first time, I started to write about my experiences. And my articles were published in a couple of magazines. And of course, when the media got onto it, suddenly the knocking on the door began. People wanted to know more. I remember RTE television one day, they come with the camera to my house and things. And what is he's still in RTE today. He's the religious reporter. What is his name?
I don't know. I'll find that out for you.
Yeah, well, I just can't think about it.
What year was this? 2003?
No, he's still working for anything to do with Vatican or religious.
Oh, yeah, I know who you're talking about. I know who you're talking about. He was there when the Pope he announced that Pope John Paul II had died, and he was there when Pope Benedict was selected.
I mean, still working for RT, I think, and he was here to interviewing me, and I didn't have any experience to this type of thing. I just remember that I was going to tell him something, and I said, no, that's too cruel. I don't want to speak about it. He said, no, go on, sort of the, tell us.
Are you talking about Joe Little?
Joe Little, that's right. Joe
Little. Thanks to the power of the internet.
Oh, yeah, very good.
Joe Little, I could see him.
Yeah, I sometimes met him on the street. He said he wanted to interview me, and afterwards,
he's lovely. He seems a lovely man.
Yeah, very nice. And but he missed out of it. He met me after I made the film and everything. He said, "Oh, terrible! I missed it. I wanted to do. I wanted to do it, And yeah, so then the whole thing started. People from the Holocaust Education Trust, Lynn, come to me, And I never forget that we were sitting on the sofa there, and I'm talking to her, and she's in tears, and I'm in tears, because I began to tell for the first time to
you'd opened the cork to the bottle.
Yeah, and it was very upsetting. And she then wanted me to participate in the Holocaust commemoration. She wanted me to read one of the articles that I wrote, and I said, Lynn, I couldn't do it. It's all so fresh in my head, and this was, of course, 60-odd years later, but it still felt.
No, it was just there. It was under the surface.
I said, I can't do it, but you know what? I will ask my son, and he will read it on my behalf, and that's what we arranged. But eventually, I of course, did these things. But it was the first time that I started, and it was in 2004 that for the first time I was invited to schools. And at the time, the Holocaust Education Trust set up a thing that was called a Holocaust Survivor Speaks. That was the thing. And it's still, Susie was lecturing. And
Susie Diamond.
Yes, Susie Diamond. And what is his name?
Zoltan and Collis.
Zoltan Collis, yeah. They still were talking about the Holocaust. So I come in, and I went a couple of times with them together, and we all spoke. And then, of course, it began sort of people were requesting, with all the publicity that I got and everything, people were requesting, they wanted to hear my story. And it built up in such a way that eventually, if people asked me to come, they had to wait 18 months because I was booked for 18 months in advance.
Yeah.
And anyway, it was one day during sometime 2007 or something. Yeah, 2007, end of 2006. I was giving a lecture to a teacher seminar. And at that seminar, one of the people that was connected with the Holocaust Education Trust invited Jerry. God, forget all the um, God. Anyway, a
Who
producer.
was he? Who was he?
He was a producer, film producer.
Oh, Jerry,
Jerry
Jerry.
Gregg. Jerry Gregg.
Yeah, Jerry Gregg. I was going to say it to you. He produced your documentary.
Yeah. So he was at this seminar, and he was also with his cameraman that he walked, and they listened to the lecture and everything. After the lecture, after the teacher came, shook my hand and everything, and when everybody sort of gone slowly, Jerry suddenly came and he shook my hand and he introduced himself. I'm Jerry Gregg. I'm a film producer. Your story is absolutely amazing. We would like to do a film about you. And I sort of said, laughing, people sometimes
You're a
say,
film star.
and then you never hear from them again, So I said, okay. I said, you want to make a film? Okay, we can make a film. But I didn't took much notice about, I just thought somebody. And it passed about 2 or 3 weeks passed, and he was talking to me, and he said, we will go to Bergen-Belsen. No, I think I sort of rang him one day. I said, Jerry, in Bergen-Belsen, it was in 2007, 2007, they are opening a museum and a teaching center in Bergen-Belsen. It would be good time to go at this time,
Yeah.
He said, oh, that's a good idea. But there was not much talk about it, And one day, a week later, he said, did you get the tickets? I said, what ticket? He said, the airline ticket to go to Bergen-Belsen. I said, you want me to get tickets to say, of course, we are going to the opening of the thing. And that's how the project of I Was a Boy in
Belson.
began.
Yeah.
And it was actually in 2008 that Ati showed my first pictures, which was I Was a Boy in Belgium. It was a 1 hour movie, very successful. And there was also a full-length movie, which was
Close to Evil.
no, this was Until the 10th Generation.
Oh, yeah.
That was the same film, but it was longer for cinemas. And I mean, this film was shown all over. We showed it in America, it was shown in Germany, and of course it was here. And also the Minister of Integration at the time, it was in October 2009, it was John Curran, I have it here written down, TD, that he brought out what is called a teacher guide. And the whole story in the teacher guide was my story. So it was sent to every school here in Ireland, about 700 schools. And with one of the DVDs, so all the schools got it. And I can say at the time, probably, the Holocaust was taught in the school, according to my story, which was a great thing. But after doing the film, Michael O'Brien, the O'Brien publisher, owner of the O'Brien publisher, saw the film, and he came to me one day. He rang me and he said, I would like to speak to you. And he came and he said, Tommy, would you write a book? And I always wanted to write a book. But you know, the stories about writing a book is that you have to send the story to publisher and you get a rejection and maybe somebody will take it on, you know. And I said to myself,
rejection's very hard as well.
yeah, I said, I don't want to go through the process. But if a publisher comes to me one day and will ask me to write a book, I will write it.
Yeah.
And so when Michael came and he said, I said, I will write a book. Yeah, I have the ideas. I know exactly what to write. And so the project started, and I wrote the book, and it actually came out in October 2011. But I never forget when I agreed to write a book. The next day, by post, I get this thick envelope, this contract, you know.
Yeah.
You get so much money in advance to write it, and when you finish it.
Oh, I long for that. Oh, I long for that day that you get a check in advance. It's different with academic books. You write an academic book, and you write it and you send it off.
Yeah, you see, not only that he give you the check and everything, but he tells you every 3 months you have to write so many words. I think
10,000 or something a day.
Yeah, and every 3
a week
months, you have to send it to the editor, and I going through this, and I just closed the envelope. Obviously, that's security for him. That in case I write a book, and then I say, "Oh, it's fantastic book. Why should I give it to Michael? I can give it to Penguin or somebody that is much more famous, big publisher."
Yeah,
know.
It's only natural.
You know, you can make a lot of money out of it. But I wasn't after the money. I just wanted because I was so devoted to this subject.
Yeah.
I wanted a book coming out that people should know what happened. And I sent the envelope back and I wrote to Michael. I said, Michael, I don't want any money. I don't want anything. I can't commit myself with every 3 months so much and all this, because that would put me under terrible pressure. I'm lecturing in school. I'm very busy. And I will do it in between, and it will take a little longer. But I assure you that I will not give it to anybody at the end. I give it to you. You have the rights for the book.
Oh, that's such, but that actually speaks to your integrity, Tommy, and it speaks to the person you are, that you would do something like that. I would do something like that.
Yeah, see the money. All a publisher talks about the money. I didn't talk about the money.
No, you didn't do this for You did this for altruistic reasons.
I didn't rely on it. Let's put it that way. The money was a secondary thing for me, And I remember getting phone call, come on, Tommy, and Anyway, it took 2 years till I finished it. And when I finished it, I sent the last bit to the chapter or whatever it was to the editor. And I wrote to Michael, I sent him an email and I said, Michael, now you can send me the contract. The last installment is with your editor. So now you can sort of sign the contract on it, and everything went from there. But of course, that book was something very successful. And
So it's a wonderful book. It's a truly wonderful book. It's in my office in Mary Immaculate, and I can't get in because of COVID-19.
Yeah.
But I'll put an image of it up.
Yeah, so it was very successful, and last year, beginning of last year, we published a second book, which is called Tommy. I didn't write it, but I was involved with the writer because it was for children, and we gave it to a children author, Etna Massey. She was a librarian, but she wrote a couple of several children books, and she wrote a lovely book, and the people in the primary school, the student in the primary school using the book. So it's very successful as well. And now, during the COVID-19, I wrote another book. It's not actually, it's more of a project. I didn't write it, but it's written in Slovak, and I translated it into English. And why did I do this? Because this was a book that we read. We had one book in the concentration camp. It was called Chin Chin, and it's about birds. It's very enjoyable fairy story for children.
What was it called?
Chin Chin.
Chin Chin.
It's mentioned in the book.
Yeah. I saw that.
Yeah. So I translated it because at the time, this book was read to us by the mother of the boy that brought the book into the camp. And it was always beautiful. The story was so beautiful. It took our mind away from the everyday life that we were going through, about the cruelty and everything that was happening. And I have planned with this book. It's not only that I translated it, I also in between incorporated myself, how we're listening to the story and everything. Anyway, it's a lovely project, and hopefully children in hospitals that going through trauma with pain and things, they might benefit from this book because it's a beautiful book. And after 75 years that it entertained us as children in concentration camp, maybe
it'll entertain others.
Or not now again, because I can't tell you the whole thing, but it's an idea. The whole thing, it's an idea.
1 second, Tommy. It's telling me here that the battery is
okay.
1 second. It keeps on now.
Yeah, it's great that it does, because sometimes people, I know that I was interviewed one time, and here I'm talking, then suddenly she said, "Oh God, the battery is gone about 20 minutes ago. We have to start all over again." You know?
Oh God.
We were listening where we stopped.
So where were we in this conversation? The book you were talking about. You thought that the book that that it would be of interest to children in Ireland.
There is, it's more. I would like to do it for charity. You see, that's the whole idea, and again helping children. But you know, this is a problem with the publisher. We see how we can work it out. You know, but
yeah.
So I wanted to do this for a long time, but I never had time. So now I succeeded. I'm still writing. I mean. There were days here I was 6 hours writing, you know. It was quite difficult, translated, because not only I was translating it, this book is written in rhyme. It's rhyme, you know.
Okay.
Yeah, it's beautiful. But when you translate it from Slovak to English, it's not in rhyme. You know, it doesn't make.
Yeah, it's lost in translation.
Yeah, yeah. So I'm working with a teacher, and he is. I send him the translation, and he puts it in rhyme again in English. So it's incredible. I mean,
That's a remarkable process.
that's just absolutely fantastic. So anyway, please God, it will succeed, and you will. If all goes well, it should be published this year sometime. You know.
And you met Joyce in what year?
So yeah, when my wife died, I got involved with the Holocaust Education Trust, of course, writing the book. I met Joyce in 2006. Actually, I met Joyce long time before. Because she lived only around the corner where we lived. And she was a young girl at the time, you know, 18, 19-year-old. And she was a lovely looking girl. And
she's a lovely looking woman.
Yeah, and she had her daughter at the same time that we had our son. So Ivan and Joyce used to meet and chat, and I used to play with the kid. I sort of didn't get involved. I didn't want to do Ivan. I didn't want to make her jealous, you know, to talk to Joyce. So I knew Joyce, but when I met her again, that was what 30 odd years later, you know. So I don't know
Serendipity.
how Joyce looks and the amazing thing is that Joyce walked just around the corner where I walked. And I used to go every day to the bank, you know, because I had to lodge money and things. So Joyce used to go in Grafton Street, and she used to see me. I didn't notice, huh? I'm talking about now after Ivan died already, you know. She used to see me, and she always sort of thought to say hello or say a word, but she never did. I never talked. But
it's quite, do you ever remember the movie Brief Encounter?
Brief Encounter.
Is a movie. It's really serendipitous, really, that you met. You know, it's that you knew each other for 30 years at a distance.
Yeah.
And all those years later, you met up.
But we my friends that I was mixing with and Joyce, I mean, they tried to do many times. She was alone, you know. She didn't. She was married and she didn't live with her husband. And they tried to do a match up with somebody, and people. She never liked anybody, you know. So. Well, one day she was in the synagogue, and
because Joyce is also Jewish, isn't she?
Yeah. Yes. And she was in the synagogue, and one of the men that I used to be very friendly with, unfortunately, he's senile now, you know, and he called Joyce to him, and he said, Joyce, would you mind if I give you phone number to Tomas Reichental, you know? She said, I know Tomas Reichental, but from years back, and she said, all right, give him my number. And then, so
the rest is history.
Number, and I rang Joyce, and we made a rendezvous to meet in Ballsbridge in a hotel, and I remember it was on a Valentine's Day. It just, we didn't realize, but when I was going to meet her, I said, oh, tomorrow is a Valentine's Day. I better bring something with me to give her, you know. And she was waiting in the hotel, and I came with this lovely bag of chocolate with, you know, with a little bow on it and everything. And I come in, and she looks at me, I look at her, I said, Happy Valentine, and gave her the thing. And it clicked, and it really was something. She's a very bubbly person, you know.
She's an amazing baker, and she's an amazing cook.
Cook and baker, you know what they say, love goes through the stomach.
You'll never have a hungry day with Joyce. Does she still do all the cooking for charity? All the baking for charity?
Well, I don't know this year, of course.
Yeah.
It won't go ahead, but we did it last year. And last year, actually, she was sick. She was in hospital when it was done. But yeah, it still, I was there. We did it, and it was very successful. And this year, obviously, we won't do it, but please God, next year, you know.
Yeah.
But
so
anyway,
what do you do during COVID? What's the COVID-19 process for, or the isolation process for Tommy Reichental? Because I imagine, and I know you so well now at this stage, that you're not a man that likes sitting around doing nothing, sunning himself.
Yeah, as I told you, I took the project of this book, so I someday I was 6 hours sitting and writing, you know. But every day I'm writing, and actually now what I'm writing is in the book, in between the verses, I'm putting my story, but in a very simple, understood way, what I went through.
Yeah.
So the book actually is for children, sort of from the age of 8. But within this little fairy story, they will be learning about the Holocaust as well. That's the idea, you know.
Yeah.
So,
you know, the thought just occurred to me there that when you look at the book, I don't know if you ever read it, The Boy in the Striped Pajamas.
Of course I did, yeah.
Yeah, you know, I wasn't sure if you were into fictional books, but or fictional accounts, but the thought just occurred to me that what that book and your life had in common was the fact that John Boyne wrote it for, and his characters were 9 years old at the particular time that the event happened. Shmuel, the little Jewish boy, was 9, and Bruno was 9, and he chose that age because he said he could understand at that point in his life, he could resonate that period of his life, his own life, with a 9-year-old boy. And you were 9 when you were released from Bergen-Belsen.
Yeah, and that's why I always said that when I wrote the Tommy book, you know, I said the Boy in Striped Pajama, it's 9-year-old, the same.
Did you? Yeah.
So I said that was a fairy story, but Tommy, it's the real boy.
That's it. You know, you have the fact-based fiction, and you have, because, you know, when you look at The Boy in the Striped Pajamas, you can't help seeing parallels between Auschwitz and
there is a lot of discussion about that book, and I was at a reading that they spoke about the boy striped pajama, and many educated people, what you call it?
Academics.
Academics, that's right. Many academics, they argue that it's a fairy story. It has no, there is no any connection in the real Holocaust, you know. And so that not many people like the book, but
well, I asked him about it, and I said, you know, that he said he never intended it as a Holocaust book. It was a book about friendship beyond the and despite all the horrors that can happen to two children and the efforts that there are to separate two children, despite all of it, they came into the world the same. The fact when they both had their heads shaved, they were the same. When you strip people of outer images, we're at the core, we're all very much the same, and we die the same. And that was the actual intention of the story. But his reference to out with, it was obvious he was talking about Auschwitz, and he was talking about the perimeters of Auschwitz and the events that were happening, and the family that was living on the commandant at Auschwitz, Rudolf Haas.
Yeah.
And you know, and when he talked about the Fury instead of the Führer,
yeah.
It was very hard, I thought, for John to argue that it wasn't intended as a Holocaust book, because you know, yes, it was a book of friendship, and that was, but you can't just slip in out with and not expect you to see a parallel there with Auschwitz.
Was a definite Holocaust
inspired.
Book. And inspired, yeah. And what I say, I also say that it's a fairy story, and maybe it's not right and all that. But in the end, my argument is that anything that helps for people to understand and learn about the Holocaust, for me, is good. And
absolutely, Tommy, that's what I believe.
Drama, I mean, millions read it, millions. For the first time, children learned that Holocaust existed. And therefore, I said in my argument, because I was speaking to the person that was giving the lecture, I introduced myself and everything. I said, anything that bring the thing, as far as I'm concerned, it's good. No other book of real Holocaust had an impact like this book. That, I mean, million of them.
Well, I have a friend whose entire family, her husband, her children, they're Muslim, and they went to see The Boy in the Striped Pajamas. Now, they hadn't known anything about the Holocaust. They came from Libya. They hadn't known anything about the Holocaust, and they came out completely upset at what they had actually seen. And you know, a Facebook friend of mine, Arshad Awan, he bought my book on the Holocaust, and he said to me, I'm proud to say it's probably the only Holocaust book in Islamabad on the Holocaust. and he has a copy of it. And you know, and I do think that books like John Boyne's introduce children who are very young, or who have never been introduced at all, as you said, to an event without inundating them too much, because the movie was graphic, the movie version. The book is not graphic. You know, nobody knows what happened. The two boys at the end, the door closes and they catch hands, and we know as adults that they died. But beyond that, children don't, but they can start asking questions. And with questions come answers, and the knowledge grows with them.
Well, I tell you my connection to this book, to Boy in Striped Pajama. John Boyne's father, he was a you know, he does investment and everything. What you call
banker?
No, he wasn't banker. He was insurance broker.
Oh, right, okay.
And he was my insurance broker.
Oh, wow.
Yeah. So when John Boyne started to write a book, and he told his father that he's writing a book about the Holocaust, his father told me, you know what? I have a client. He's a Holocaust survivor. Would you like to speak to him? And John said, no, this is my book. I don't want to speak to a Holocaust survivor. And at the end, when he wrote the book, he said, Dad, here you have the book. Read it. Tell me what you think. And John Boyne's father read it, and he came back and he said, John, this is rubbish. Well, you know, but of course, he sold millions of them.
Millions, because he knew his market, Tommy.
So afterwards, he said to his father, I mean, since then he wrote several books. He said, Dad, I will never give you to read any of my
book again.
But also about the film. You know, the film.
Yeah, I saw the film.
Any film was rehearsed and did properly. But there is the scene that you described when they had to strip and they were going to the gas chamber. This was a clip that they didn't rehearse, and the children didn't know about it. And in the last moment, they pushed the children in between these adult people
prisoners
around. And you wouldn't have imagined at the time, but it was a very real scene, because the children were totally confused. What is happening?
Yeah.
And the camera took it, and it was absolutely successful.
Yeah, it was. It was different from the book, because in the book, as I say, they just went in and it said the doors closed, and they held hands, and that was it. Whereas there was no mention in the book of gas being poured in, the Zyklon B being poured in, and there was nothing graphic. So it allowed, I think if one thing it's successful in is that it allows children of that age to read it and then say what happened, and ask, and why did Bruno shave his head, and blah blah blah, because in the movie the little boy who played Bruno refused to shave his head, so they gave him a cap instead. In all that he did in the movie, the one thing he refused point blank to do was to shave his head.
Yeah.
You know, but
anyway, when I come with that, you know, you go to the primary school, they all had the boy in striped pajama, they all read it, and I always, when I gave, you know, I usually in primary school, I only tell them a story.
But there's some other very good books as well, Tommy, for primary schools. There's a Little Boy Star, an allegory of the Holocaust. It introduces very young children who would be much younger than 9, to the events. And again, it doesn't even mention the Holocaust. As adults, we know it's the Holocaust, and you know, it's more of an allegory, and it gets children talking about difference and about understanding and about the dangers of standing by and watching what's happening.
One of my things, don't become a bystander, you know.
The dangers of being the bystander when something happens, because you're just as guilty. But Tommy, where do you see the next stage of your life post COVID-19?
Don't ask me about the next stage. You know that I'm too old for talking about next stage.
Oh, for God's sake! You know,
something that you you're not very keen. By the way, during the COVID-19, about a month ago, about a month ago, I was 5 days in hospital. And while I was in hospital, I had a mini stroke. So
I tried ringing you, and I wasn't getting an answer, and I
might have been during that period. That was
yeah.
end of April, in April, yeah. So I was 5 days in hospital. I was actually before yesterday. I had a MRI again in my head because they saw it. They wanted to see just that everything's all right. But yeah, so if you ask me post, thank God, nothing happened to me. I was very lucky because usually when people have a mini stroke, some little thing might happen. For example, my brother, a couple of years ago, he had a mini stroke and he lost something in his speech. Sometimes when he speaks, he can't remember words. And this is from the mini stroke.
And you lost, thank God, you just bounced back.
I was paralyzed for 10 minutes on my all my left side was paralyzed. I got up from a chair, it was paralyzed, and I fell. I actually fell into this behind me, into the cabinet there, and I cut my face, and I was all black. But then
Joyce must have gotten an enormous shock
because
she's such a fusser over you.
I was bleeding and it went all over my shirt, and I didn't know where the blood is coming from, and I went to the bathroom, washed myself, and then I went to Joyce, she was in the other room, and I said, "What happened to you?" I broke down. I was very upset. I said, "Something happened to me. I think I had a stroke." And then when they did the MRI, they could see that little vein burst in my brain, and that's what caused it.
But you're okay now.
Perfect, yeah.
But Tommy, we're going to.
Hello, Sean. My name is Tomas Reichental. I'm a Holocaust survivor. And when I'm looking at you, you are 9-year-old. At your age, I was in concentration camp, Bergen-Belsen.
What was life like before you went into Holocaust?
Well, I grew up in a village, just like villages in Ireland, and I had a beautiful life. I always telling people that where I lived, it was my paradise. I used to play with children from the village. We had a good life, and we didn't experience any hatreds, or people were very nice to us. So I have very fond memory from my childhood until 1939, when the Holocaust began. We began to be hated and persecuted, and the life became very difficult.
Did you ever know or see Anne Frank?
Well, Anna Frank, she was in Bergen-Belsen where I was. And after the liberation, actually, I played in the hut where Anna Frank used to live. But Anna Frank died well before the liberation. So we wouldn't have known who Anna Frank was at the time. Her story came out only after the war. So I wouldn't have known that Anna Frank lived in that hut.
Tommy, what can children do to share your story?
First of all, I lecture in schools, but I lecture in seniors schools, not for children, because my story is sometimes not very pleasant. But I wrote a book, and we're also writing a book now for children. And you will be able to get that book and find out, and of course you can find out about me on the internet.
Tommy, why is it important that children and older people know your story?
It is very important, because if we don't learn from the history, we never learn. And if we never learn, Holocaust can be repeated. It's already happened a couple of times since. One of them was in Srebrenica, in Bosnia, where a genocide happened, not in 1945. Genocide happened in Central Europe in 1995, in a civilized Europe. So we have to be very careful that history doesn't repeat itself. And that's why I'm lecturing to senior student and association and universities, so that people learn. Because learning is very, very important. And we have to teach not to hate, not to bully. And if you see anybody being bullied, don't become a bystander. Tell them it's wrong. Nobody said it was wrong when it happened to us. And look what happened, this tragedy of the Holocaust.
What can we do to share your story?
Well, you know, I'm quite old. And the next 10, 20 years, none of us will be left. So you have to pass the story of us, the Holocaust, what happened, and keep the memory, telling your children, perhaps even your grandchildren. And so we never forget what happened not long ago, only 70 years ago. What I would say to young people today, that people should not forget. And what I'm doing is talking to young people and teaching them about the era of 30s and 40s, so that we should never forget and make sure that we erase the racism and xenophobia from our midst, because unfortunately we have racism in Ireland. And if somebody sees somebody else being bullied, or because they're foreign, or because they're different color skin, or they different religion, they shouldn't become bystander. They should get involved and say it's wrong. I would like to quote some quotes from Anna Frank. How wonderful it is that nobody need to wait a single moment before starting to improve the world. Who is happy will make others happy too.